when we ask people, are they a cultural fit? What we're looking for, like, is this somebody who's really interested in others or is really primarily focused on themselves? That's what we want them to apply. And so that's why you got to start with, what's the culture we want to have? And if people have clarity on that, then they can intuit a lot of that through an interview process.
This is the Brandon Smith Show, and of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith. So today on our show, we are going to talk about a topic that I love to talk about, frankly, and had on this show before. We're going to talk about culture, and we're going to talk about culture in kind of two ways. Culture, the way I like to say it, is culture with a big C, big organizational company culture, and then culture with a little c. Culture you set with your team, your department, maybe even with your family at home. What does that look like? So we're going to really kind of take on this journey, and I can't think of a better person to take it on than you, Shane. So I'm lucky and fortunate to have Shane Jackson, so president of Jackson Healthcare, on the show today. So Shane, thanks for coming on.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and so what I love about having you on is I've had other people who are kind of culture consultants, for lack of a better word, and they advise on it, and that's great, great perspective. But I think what makes you particularly skilled in this topic is we could call you maybe a culture practitioner, perhaps, because you're really doing it every day.
Yeah.
I mean, and you're doing it both with the company, so the big C, but even, you talk about, and in your book, Fostering Culture, A Leader's Guide to Purposefully Shaping Culture. So we'll talk more about the book in a minute. How to do it even with a little c.
Right. Hiring
for culture, when you got to let people go because they aren't a good culture fit, all that blocking and tackling, which is a little stuff, but you and I were talking before the show, that's kind of what makes culture really happen.
Absolutely.
Is all the little actions and behaviors that you do. So really excited to have you on the show. Before we kind of jump into this topic of culture, for our listeners that maybe don't know who you are, share a little bit about kind of who you are, Jackson Healthcare, a little bit about kind of your journey up to this point, and then we can dive into this fun topic.
Sure, yeah. So glad to be here, and obviously love talking about this. I love talking to you about it as well, because I know you have so much passion on it. Just a little bit about me. I have a lot of amazing roles I get to serve in my life. I'm a husband of 22 years to a wife who, while I seem to keep looking older, she looks more beautiful. I don't know how that deal happened. I have 3 kids. 2 of them are teenagers, and getting to experience the joys of going through that. I'm a coach. I've coached, I think, 30-something youth athletic teams, and right now I'm coaching a 13-year-old travel softball team, which is I told somebody the other day that was my second job at this point, and then I stopped and considered it for a moment and thought, no, I think Jackson Healthcare is my second job. Coaching a travel softball team is really my primary role at this point. Yeah.
Softball. What other sports have you also coached?
Basketball and football and baseball. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I love coaching, and maybe we can talk about this more. But the same principles of culture of a company or a group, they apply to a team.
Yeah.
It all comes from the same place. So I get to do that as well, and some creative kind of artistic stuff on the side that I love to do personally, and then Jackson Healthcare, which is just have the great pleasure of being able to be a part in leading that company.
So I think of Jackson Healthcare as one of those hidden gems, because I talk to so many people that say, "Tell me more about Jackson Healthcare. I don't know much about Jackson Healthcare."
Yeah.
And yet when they find out, they're like, "Oh my gosh, where has this place been hiding?"
Huh.
So for listeners that don't know, haven't found that gem yet, tell us a little bit about Jackson Healthcare.
Yeah, sure. A lot of people have not heard of us because we're a business-to-business brand, not a consumer brand, and so people don't know who we are. We started the company in 2000. My dad really launched the business and asked me to come in and join him in creating it. So we started in 2000. We are in healthcare services and technology. So the biggest part of what we do is providing clinicians in all 50 states and then technology to support and help make sure that patients have access to care whenever and wherever they need it. And so it's a pretty great business to be in because, frankly, just the net result of what we do is that literally people's lives get saved every day. And so, at the end of a bad day, that's kind of a good thing to say. The result of my career is that we're saving people's lives. So we get to do that, but we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year.
Wow, congrats.
We have just tremendous growth. We have just over 1,500 associates that work for us, about 1,100 of them in Alpharetta, Georgia, our corporate headquarters. And then we have, I don't even know the number, I should, but probably approaching about 10,000 clinicians that work for us all around the country.
Wow, really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so historically, I haven't spent time with you guys in a while, but
Yeah.
historically, you were broken into lots of smaller businesses
We are.
within the Jackson Healthcare kind of family,
That's right.
which also makes this conversational culture interesting.
It sure
Because
does.
you've got to share the same DNA, but there may be a little bit of differences between the siblings.
Yeah, that's right. And it's good. So Jackson Healthcare is kind of the parent brand, and we have 16 different companies that have their own brands, and that's actually how we go to market. And I like
That
to joke-
all live in that building.
yeah, a lot of them are
Most
here
of-
in Alpharetta.
yeah.
Some of them are in other parts of the country, but a lot of them are in our corporate headquarters. And so that's actually how we go to market, and is through these different brands. And it does make for some interesting cultural challenges because we have what we're doing at corporate, but then we have all these different companies, and the way that culture gets interpreted and all that is a little bit different. Maybe that's something we can explore a little bit.
Yeah, really cool. Awesome. Okay. So let's talk about this book here, Fostering Culture, A Leader's Guide to Purposefully Shaping Culture. What inspired you to write it?
So this was really the result of a time when I got a little bit flustered and scared. So in 2014, I moved from operating our largest company within Jackson Healthcare. My dad came to me, said he was really ready to kind of move on to a different season of his career, didn't want to be in the day-to-day anymore, and asked me to take over as president of the parent company, which was great, very exciting. And right after that, I was given a speech. And I don't even remember what the topic of the speech was, but I remember at the end of it, I took questions from the audience, and some of the audience asked me this question. They said, "You guys are growing like crazy." At that point, we won Best Places to Work in Atlanta for 7 or 8 years in a row, or that sort of thing. And he said, "That's just so impressive. Can you tell me about the culture of your company?" Now, I like to consider myself a fairly well-spoken person on just about any topic. And I was stumped. And I'm in front of all these people, and I'm like, we have a nice building. I really didn't know how to answer it. And I came up with something that probably sufficed in the moment. But I remember leaving that place and having this moment where I thought, if I can't even describe the culture of our company, how am I going to lead a company through a transition from my father, who was greatly responsible for that culture? How am I going to lead through the transition of leadership and through the tremendous growth that we were really starting to experience at that time? And it made me think, I need to understand what culture is and how it works, so that for me, I could understand what the levers were that I had as a leader to influence it and hopefully sustain and even grow the culture that even at that time we thought was very critical to our success. And so that led me to go, I do a lot? Start reading. It's like someone surely has written something on this topic that will help me understand this. And I read several books. And most of them were okay, but they weren't really helpful. Because what I found was that people wrote about how to have a winning culture, or how to have an innovative culture, or something like that. But all of them started with an assumption that the reader knew what culture was. And no one really explored that. And so I actually found one book that was pretty good. It's a book that I actually cite in my book, but it was a textbook. I mean, I think it's used in some graduate level class somewhere, not super reader friendly, informative, not reader friendly.
Yeah.
And so as I began to understand this and realized that really the answer for me of how we were going to sustain and grow our culture was I had to have all the leaders in our organization understand what culture was and the values and beliefs that we apply to how we grow our culture. They needed to understand what culture was. They needed to go through that same process I did. And so the way I solved that primarily is through writing the book.
Okay, so maybe this is an unfair question, but now I'm really curious.
Okay.
What is culture?
What is culture?
So when you think about that, kind of when you kind of got your head around what that means to you, and what you try and get in the heads of all your leaders, how do you frame that up?
My definition of culture is the atmosphere that results from the decisions and actions that a group takes to accomplish its purpose. The atmosphere that a group takes from the decision actions takes to accomplish its purpose. And there's a few things I like about this, but I like this term atmosphere because I think people kind of get it. If you're, if you watch a big sporting event on TV or something, sometimes you hear the announcers say, the atmosphere is electric here, and whatever. It's what it feels like to be a group at that time, right? And so when we are talking about culture and we don't realize it is when we say things like this: "Oh, we don't do that here," or "Let me tell you how we do that here," right? So it's this understanding these group norms, the things that we do and we don't do, the decisions and the actions that as a group we take in order to accomplish our purpose. And you get in, it's this kind of atmosphere and just people know how to behave.
Yeah.
Right? That's the culture, but it's the result of everything we do, which means that, by the way, there's nothing that we do as a leader or as a member of a group that doesn't influence our culture, because it's all of it.
Yeah. So, wow, that's cool. So most often when I hear people define it, they spend a lot of time on the values and beliefs. In fact, I was talking to a company yesterday about that, and I was asking, what does it mean to you? What does culture mean? Values, beliefs, norms, actions. But you make it, even identity, someone brought up yesterday. But what I like that you said was you use the word atmosphere several times. I think that's a really powerful word because it is so much about a feeling.
Right.
So you can have all the right actions and beliefs, or all that to generate the results that you want, and people feel burned out, feel not trusted, feel internally competitive with each other, threatened, not psychologically safe, whatever terms we can use.
Right.
So I love that you kind of double down on that word atmosphere. It's a powerful word. It means lots of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and you're right about that. And we hear, like, one of the things we've heard for years from people is they say, when we walk in your building, we can just feel the culture.
Yeah.
And I remember I'm like, what does that mean? Right. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome, but what do you mean by that? They're like, people smile here. Or on the elevator, people talk to me. They don't just, stare at their phone or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you said. It's that feeling that you get. Now, you just talked about values and beliefs, which is huge. And I don't think we should overlook that, because understanding culture for me in that definition was very powerful, but it wasn't especially helpful, because what was more important to say, okay, if it's a result of all the things we do and don't do, and it makes people feel like how they should behave in this culture, in this group, why do groups make the decisions that they make? Why do we choose to do some things and not others? Why, for instance, do you have two companies who are in the exact same industry, serving the same customers, trying to provide the same kind of service, and why are they so different? Why does one company choose to do things one way and another choose to go the other way? That's where the power is. And this is what you just talked about. Our decisions as groups, our decisions as individuals are all driven by our values and beliefs. That's the paradigm through which we see every decision that we can make, the actions that we can take, and that's how we decide which ones we're going to do and we're not going to do.
So I've got a question for you.
Okay.
Before I jump into it,
Yeah.
it something that struck me last year. I was having another kind of one of these culture kind of experts on, and I was talking to her, kind of, and my glasses were fogging up, and I realized these guys, my glasses, are like the lenses, are like the values and beliefs.
Yeah, I love it. That's good.
And just like going to the optometrist, you should probably get them checked every once in a while to make sure that it's still working.
Yeah.
So now, let's talk about culture with a big C. Okay. So then you got your head around culture, kind of what it means to you. You said, all right, I want to create this atmosphere. We want to create this atmosphere. Or maybe you had it and you want to keep it, right? Because that was almost my experience with you guys. You had it. How do we keep it?
Right.
And so you want to get everybody looking through those same lenses. What are some things that you did kind of at a big C level to get all those companies, 16 companies, and all those people, 1,500 people, kind of looking through the same lenses? What are some levers to pull to lead culture at the big C level?
Yeah. So first of all, you're exactly right. For us, this wasn't we need to change a horrible culture. This was, we've got a great culture and we've got to figure out how to scale it.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
so, and because during this time, we've been very fortunate with our growth, but I mean, we've tripled the size of the company over about the last 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, and we were bringing in people. I mean, we had more people in leadership positions than we had in the company 10 years ago. And so it was, okay, how do we take what we have and help new people coming in, especially our new leaders, understand it so that they can perpetuate it and use it as a way that they run the business. And so for us, a lot of it was coming up with language that we could use to help people be purposeful about it. Because so here's the thing about this. Every group, every company has a culture. You have decisions that you make and your group norms and all those sorts of things. And as a group, you collectively have the values and beliefs that you use to make those decisions. It exists. The only question is, how long does it take new people coming into the group to figure those things out?
Oh, what a cool way to think about that.
Yeah. So
I've never heard anybody say it that way. It's the how long does it take for people to figure it out?
Yeah. And so when someone comes into an organization, it's they're figuring out where they belong and what we do and whatever, and then eventually they go, oh, like, yeah, I don't like how they do that. I don't buy into that.
Yeah.
Or hopefully the otherwise, they're like, oh man, this is perfect. This is highly aligned with me. And one of the things I talk about in the group is that the primary metric in my mind of the strength of a culture is loyalty of the people in the group. People join a group because they have a purpose, something they need to accomplish that they can only accomplish by being part of a group, right? If I could do it on my own, I don't need to team up with you. We don't need to form a group, right? But if there's something I need to accomplish, I can't do it on my own. I get together with other people who have skills that I don't have, resources I don't have, whatever, and we get together and try to figure it out. And so when someone joins a team, they join a company, it's because they have some kind of purpose that group is trying to solve, and they want to solve also. But they will prefer groups that are more aligned with the way they think that ought to be done than others that aren't, right? And so I joined a company, and I have the purpose, like, I need to, feed my family and sleep indoors and, all those sorts of things, trying to earn a paycheck, right, or whatever, But if I have an option of somewhere that's doing that in a way that's more consistent with my values and beliefs, I'm going to opt out and I'm going to leave to go there.
Yeah.
And so what we needed to do was help our leaders understand, first of all, what are those things so that A, they could opt in or out, and be purposeful about the actions that they were taking so that we had consistency. And then most importantly, so that new people who were considering joining knew what those were and could say, yeah, that's a place for me, or no, that's not a place for me.
Yeah. So you're trying to make it a little spicier to a certain degree. So people taste it and they say, oh, that's exactly what I'm looking for, or that's not my kind of flavor.
Yeah, absolutely. We had this conversation. This is a few years ago now. And we were talking about hiring for culture, and which is something we talk about in the book. And how
I'm going to ask you about that, because everyone always asks me. That's a great. People ask all the time. That seems to be one of the many mysterious things around cultures. Okay, how do you hire for that?
Well, and so I was having this conversation with our talent acquisition group a few years ago, and around, okay, really, how do we screen for that? Like, what questions do you want us to ask, and that sort of thing. And there are some things, and we can talk more about it. But here's the thing I told them. I said, guys, what would make it like way easier to hire people who are highly aligned with our values and beliefs? Like what? If everyone who applied was highly aligned with our values and beliefs. At which point they looked at me like, yeah, that's another stupid thing that Shane says that nobody actually gets right. And I was like, no. It's like if you didn't have to worry about screening for that, because everyone who applied here already knew this is what these guys believe, and they're really serious about it, to the point that, like, if you work there and you don't have some of those same kind of core beliefs, you're probably not going to last long. Guess what? they're not going to apply. Only people who buy into that apply. And so that's been one of our core things in this. And again, kind of giving it language, giving it clarity has helped us communicate it with our leaders, with our associates, but also outside the organization and even through the hiring process of like we talk about this early on. So people know this is the kind of organization this is. And if that resonates with you, you should apply here. If not, don't waste your time.
Yeah, I love that. So we're about to roll into break,
Yep.
but I think that's a great kind of stopping point for us. But I want to summarize. So a lot of it is, I mean, I don't want to oversimplify it, but it's a lot about communication. It's communicating with your leaders what matters, what the lenses they need to be looking through, the actions that you want to see them taking. But then it's really making sure you're communicating a couple steps out front to those potential folks joining the company.
That's right.
Whether they call that marketing or clarity around who you are, or identity. So they see that and they go, wow, they're really focused and serious about this stuff over there. And either I want to be part of that or I don't want to be part of that. Makes the selection process a lot easier.
Absolutely.
Okay, so when we come back from break, we're going to take that big C and we're going to turn it into a little C.
Fantastic.
And we're going to talk about, okay, so you got a team. How do you set that? How do you lead them and create that culture that you want? Which may also dovetail in the family. You never know. Okay, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Here's your coaching minute for the week, presented to you by the Leadership Foundry. Dysfunction in the workplace, it's a pervasive problem. Here's a simple tip to eliminate dysfunction, both in your team, but even in the environments around you. Clarify your team members' roles, goals, and responsibilities. So just spend some time thinking about, does all of my team know? Does each of them know what their role is, what the goals are of the team, and their responsibilities? If the answer is yes, you right there eliminate 50% of all the dysfunction that could come up in your team. If the answer is no, think about how you could do that better. When we don't do that, one of two things happens. Either people overlap work and they step on each other's toes, or you have one person carrying much bigger load while a couple other people are hanging out not doing near as much work. It's one of the big problems in the nonprofit world, is a lack of clarity around roles, goals, and responsibilities. So focus on those three things, and I promise you, not only will you eliminate dysfunction, it's going to make your workplace that much more enjoyable. Welcome back to the Brandon Smith Show. Of course, I'm your host, Brandon Smith, and we've been talking today about culture. And we've been talking about it kind of with the big C, kind of the organizational culture and how you set it and lead it. And now we're going to move into the little C, kind of that department culture or that team culture. And of course, I've got an amazing guest, Shane Jackson, president of Jackson Healthcare. So Shane, you gave some really cool, before the break. I mean, my mind's still kind of blown around a couple things I hadn't ever really thought of. Atmosphere being one, and the time in which when a new person joins, they kind of get it. Here's what the culture is, the values, the beliefs, the actions, all that stuff. How long does it take? And the idea is shortening that time. Super cool. That one's cool because you can measure it,
Right.
which I think is really, really neat. Not that you want to give someone a test. Okay, it's day 3. Here's your test. Here's your number 2 pencil. Let's see how you do. So let's now pivot a little bit down to a lot of the listeners here are going to become manager, director level. They've got teams. And they're like, yeah, but I really want to figure out how to set a culture for my team because, we sure could work a little better together. What are some things, when you're trying to take this idea of culture and push it down into your organization and those managers or directors are kind of asking, how do we do that? What are some areas we can start with?
Well, first, I like the fact that you're working off the assumption that you have people who are leading teams thinking about how do I create a culture for my team. Because one of the things that I found in talking to people who are leading teams like that is sometimes they feel like it's kind of not up to them. I've had these conversations, especially with people who are working in companies, leading teams in companies where maybe they don't really agree with a lot of what's happening from a value standpoint. They don't really feel like they fit into the culture. and they're like, what do I do here? Like what can be done? Or frankly, just don't realize the power that they have as a manager, as a leader, to influence the culture and influence the people that are on that team. And so I think the first thing is, what was the assumption behind your question, is to realize if you're in a leadership role, you have tremendous influence on those that you are leading, and the ability to create a culture or maybe a subculture within your organization
Or
on your
atmosphere.
team, or an atmosphere on your team
Yeah.
that is unique to you. And so I think, first of all, just taking that ownership and realizing that you have the ability to do it. And by the way, you are doing it. Whether or not you're being purposeful and conscious about it is a different question. And so if you're thinking about this, that's actually where I'd tell you to start, is to realize I am setting the tone, heavily influencing the culture of my team. How do I want to use that influence? What do I want the culture, what do I want the atmosphere on my team to be? This is one of those things that I think most people just don't take the time to think deeply enough about. And if you subscribe to the theory that your culture, the decisions you make, things you do and you don't do, are going to be driven through that lens, the glasses of your values and beliefs, you got to start there of determining, what do you really value, right? What is actually really important to you? What are the things that you believe in business and in life work?
Yeah.
And that those are the practices you apply when you have to make a decision, when you're dealing with people, you're dealing with a customer, whatever it is just sit there and apply. One of my favorite kind of sayings, I have no idea who said this originally, you can't give away something you don't have. And if you don't know what these things are, it's hard to be purposeful about instilling them in the culture and the atmosphere of the team that you lead. And so to me, that's step one. Figure out what it is you believe and what you want to do with the influence that you have.
Yeah. Okay. So then we get this sense of it. So I'm going to throw you potentially a curveball. Okay. But I have a feeling you can hit it. Okay. So what if you have this kind of come to Jesus moment and you have this realization of what your values are? You say, okay, I got it. I got my values. But it turns out the values that you have are not creating an atmosphere that is positive for your team, right? So you're super driven. You're kind of always seeking for improvement, so you can be a little overly critical.
Yeah.
When we know those leaders, right?
Yeah.
And in some ways they can be very effective, but man, it takes a toll on a team.
Right.
How do you bridge that gap? Because it's kind of like your values are not going to get you the atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I think there's a couple of different things there, and it might be helpful to kind of separate things a little bit. Your core values, the things that really drive you, that drive what you want out of life and those sort of things, those are pretty hard coded.
Yeah.
They're really, and frankly, they're hard coded by the time you're like 7 or 8, and they're hard to change. And so I think, first of all, getting people to be like honest about what that is, because here's the problem, that sometimes you ask people like, what do you value? Most of them don't really know. They'll tell you what you think you want to hear. I value integrity and value family, and people are like, that liar is never at home, whatever, right? And so that's kind of hard coded. Beliefs are a little bit different. Like, beliefs are, this is what I think works. Like, if I do this, this works. And there's varying degrees of how hard coded and ingrained those are, but they're much more malleable than your values.
It's a great distinction.
Right. And so if you've got a leader that's saying like, hey, I really want to have a high performing team, like success, achievement is a big value for me, and I want to have a group that's high achievement, but the way that I'm activating that on my team is just not working. I would say that the opportunity there is to go back and challenge some of your beliefs on the way you communicate, on the way that you measure success, on the way that you set goals, whatever, those sorts of things, and say, okay, let's start looking at
Beautiful.
these. And if there's an opportunity there of things that aren't as kind of hard coded, then let's look at the way that we're activating this to achieve your values and what you want to do there.
I love that. So using my analogy, you might have a value of high performance and excellence. Your belief is the only way to get there is by kind of constantly being critical.
Right.
And you realize that I need to change that belief.
That's
So
right.
there may be another way to still achieve the goal of high performance and excellence.
Absolutely.
And so kind of re-examining that. Nice. Okay. All right. I knew you could hit that curveball. I just knew it. I just knew it. Yeah. I had a belief that I was going to have this show for a long time until you came on. And now my belief has changed that maybe you'll be taking over the show.
You have no worries about that. Yeah.
All right. So now I do want to talk a little about hiring. I want to talk about hiring, and I want to talk about when someone is not a good fit anymore or they misstep on values, and you have to kind of make that decision to invite them to find another home. But let's start on the hiring side first.
Yeah.
I always get the question, you probably do too. It's kind of one of the classic puzzles that most people have. How do you hire for culture fit?
Yeah.
And so one thing that you said was at the big C level, we can make sure people are really clear on who we are and what we stand for as a company. How about at the department level? How do you manage that? What are some things that advice you might have to a hiring manager?
Sure. So let me give you kind of two things here. And the second one I'm going to spend a lot more talking about. So first of all, if you have clarity on kind of the core values and beliefs of your team that you want to make sure anyone comes in identifies with, you can come up, I think, with like behavioral questions that tease those things out. So like as an example, one of our core values is around thinking of others first, serving others, right? And so we ask questions in the interview process of looking for examples in someone's career and that sort of thing where they have applied that, right? And so we're asking some things like that. So you can do things that just in the mechanics of the interview. But here's one that's actually much simpler. And I learned this one from Chick-fil-A. Years ago, I went down to, had a tremendous opportunity to go down to the Chick-fil-A headquarters and spend some time with some of their executives. And the primary focus of the day was to learn how Chick-fil-A thinks about innovation, which like they're really good at. And it was an incredible day, but literally over lunch, I'm just sitting there, we're eating down their cafeteria, eating some Chick-fil-A sandwiches. And we get on this topic, and I asked them the same thing, like, how do you guys hire for culture? And so here's what I found out, and I don't know if this is still true. This was several years ago, but I bet you they still hold to this principle. They said, well, so first of all, one of the things you have to understand is that to get a job at Chick-fil-A corporate, on average, someone has to interview with 14 people. Oh. And I went, whoa, like that's, it's a competitive market. Like we're trying to get people in and out, offer them as fast as we can or whatever. And they said, no, it takes typically about 6 months and they can interview with 14 people. Said, here's the thing that we've learned about culture. Every one of those 14 people is asked whether or not they think this candidate is going to be a cultural fit on their team. And we figure that if all 14 say yes, either they're a fit or they're just an incredible actor. And so the application I had to our company when I came back immediately, we didn't get to 14, but I was like, guys, we got to up the number of interviews that people go through. And the key is making sure that each one of them knows that part of what they're going to evaluate on that candidate is this person going to be a cultural fit? Now, here's where you got to be careful. One of the things I've heard in the past is in the interview, kind of the application that the question you want to answer for culture is this somebody you'd want to go have a beer with, right? Now, I'm not a big fan of that question for a couple reasons. One, I think there's some diversity challenges that introduces and kind of confuses what we're really looking for. The second is for our organization, though, is I'm not really looking to hire a bunch of people that are fun at a bar. What I want is a lot of people in the organization who are really at a core level interested in serving other people, because that's what drives our culture. And so when we ask people, are they a cultural fit? What we're looking for, like, is this somebody who's really interested in others or is really primarily focused on themselves? That's what we want them to apply. And so that's why you got to start with what's the culture we want to have. And if people have clarity on that, then they can intuit a lot of that through an interview process.
Yeah, he's taking over my show. It's over. This is too good. It's too good. It's too good. So, okay, let me summarize what I heard
Yeah.
because it was just gold. I love the idea of thinking about cultural fit and bringing in more lenses, more people.
Yeah.
So look, so Chick-fil-A does 14. That's a pretty big number,
Yeah.
but how do we increase the number of people? And then they need to know they're asking for that culture fit,
Yeah.
and then define that question
Right.
that ties to your culture. So I've heard the beer question often tied to investment banking. Would you want to
Yeah,
go have
yeah.
a beer with the person? Consulting, their version of it is the airport test.
Right.
If you were stuck in an airport with this person,
Right. Right.
would you be okay, or would it be like the worst experience of your life?
Yeah.
But finding out what does it mean for you. For you, service is so important for the company and serving others. So, that's the thing that you want to tease out.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. All right. I love it. Now, I don't think we can really do culture properly if we don't talk about some of the hard side of it, which is how do you maintain it, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like with our kids, you set all the rules, but ultimately anyone as a parent knows there comes those days, probably yesterday, you're like my kids, where you had to have a pretty tough conversation.
Yeah.
So tell us about the importance, if there is one, of exiting people that aren't good culture fits.
Yeah.
And when do you know that? And what's the right way to do that?
Yeah. One of the phrases I use, I think I might even have a chapter in the book with this title: hires refine your culture, fires define your culture.
I love that. It's beautiful.
And you think about that first one, our last topic of hiring. Whenever you bring someone new into the group, they've got kind of their own unique style. They're, hopefully they identify with their values and beliefs, but they apply it a little bit differently, right? And it just kind of refines that atmosphere and hopefully enriches it. But when you eliminate someone's employment, when you say you're no longer allowed to be a part of this group because of a values issue, that really defines that we are serious about this. One of the arguments that I've gotten in many times over the years with my HR department, and they would confirm this, is around the communication that I want to have with the team after we terminate someone over a values issue. Because they start getting, Shane, you can't say too many things. You're going to open us up to, legal, whatever. And I want to make sure that everyone is very, very clear. If we have someone that is not behaving in a way that's aligned with our core values, that they know that's why they're no longer here. Right now, this is not an exercise in gossip, and you don't want to get into those sorts of things.
Yeah.
But that's a defining moment. One of the experiences I had, this was years ago. We had a really pretty high profile hire for us. And this was we were much smaller then. So it was a big deal to hire. We brought in a guy, paid a big search firm and paid a bunch of expenses to move him in and those sorts of things. Super smart, technically quite good at his job. And not even 90 days in, it was reported back to me that he had really been speaking in a demeaning way to someone who was at a, like almost entry level position in our company. And it was just absolutely unacceptable. And I mean, I let him go that day. And I pulled his team that had been reporting to him. It was probably a team about 15 or 20 people at that time. And I called him in. I said, here's the news. This is what happened. I confirmed it with a few other people to make sure it was true. And so this individual's no longer with us. But here's the big thing, is that I need to apologize to you. Because my job is to make sure that you have everything you need to do to be successful, and that you have a leader that's going to lead this group in a way that's consistent with our values. And I failed at that. And I'm going to get better at it next time. And that was probably 11 or 12 years ago. And I still have people on that team that will come up to me every once in a while and talk about that moment, because they said, that's the moment we knew you were serious about the values that drive our culture.
That's a great story. Great story. Yeah, so it sounds like, again, a sensitive area, but important one. When you do exit someone because they violate the values or are not honoring the values properly, find a way to use that moment, while a difficult moment, to reemphasize what really matters. So one last question, and then I want to kind of start to wrap us towards close. What's your view on how quick to pull the trigger on those kinds of situations?
Oh man, so much judgment and discernment there. A lot of it just depends on the situation. So in that situation I just described, like we had a person who's in a leadership position who violated a very fundamental value that we have, which is respect for the individual. That one of the things we talk about, we have no class systems. Everyone is just as valuable and worthy of respect as anyone else, just regardless of their title. That one's pretty sacrosanct for me. Like, you don't get a lot of second chances on that, especially if you're in a leadership position. But so one of the things that we really have to discern whenever you go through this is this a situation where we've got someone who needs some coaching, they can learn through this, or is this just kind of a core issue that we're not going to change? A lot of that, frankly, has to do with how senior and what kind of leadership they're in our organization. Like if a senior leader does something like that, like it's done. If I've got somebody very young, who maybe just got promoted to a manager for the first time and now they're kind of feeling their oats a little bit and they speak down to someone, I'm more apt to say, let's coach through this. Let's make sure we do what we need to do to heal the relationships that you might have damaged through this. But let's take an opportunity to learn from it. But there's tremendous discernment that takes place there. I got this question several years ago. We had an individual on the team who was going through some things personally that resulted in some behaviors that weren't great. And I had some people come to me from the team and say, like, we don't understand why you're sticking with this lady through this. And I told them, look, my bent is that more often than not, I want to give people the opportunity to grow, and maybe that's good over the long term or not. I don't really know, but it's kind of my bent. But my litmus test is I want to stick with them and give them the opportunity to grow as long as I can, and as long as it's not having a detrimental impact on the team. If I can protect them, if we can heal and maintain some of those relationships and give that person the opportunity to grow, I want to try to stick with them. I would say, frankly, I think we as an organization have probably erred maybe on being a little too late and a little too patient sometimes. And probably every once in a while need to be a little bit more adherent to no, this is not going to change, and we need to make a move. If you're believing in certain people, that's a challenge that you have.
Yeah, totally. So I thought I had a really good framework while you were talking, and then you kind of blew it out of the water a little bit. But I don't know. You can probably add another piece to it. But yeah. I think it's, from what hearing you say is, you look through a couple, go back to our lenses analogy. You look at the person's experience, right? The less experience, the more grace you might give them, right? You look at the responsibility they've got.
Yep.
Like if they've got lots of people under them, then you're more likely to move quick, because that's a lot of people that could be negatively impacted versus maybe a smaller group that you've got a little more time to work through. Yeah. But then a third one, that's the one you kind of surprised me with, which was you also look kind of at context or situation. Like if they're going through something personal, if there's some other factor that is change their behavior for whatever reason, is that another reason to kind of give them a little more grace and kind of support them a little longer.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, well, this has been great. I mean, we're over time, but that's been fantastic, and it's perfectly fine. So I always ask all my guests this question: what's one life hack you have for us on how we can live a life more free from dysfunction? It could be personal or professional.
So such a fascinating question. Even, by the way you frame that of free from dysfunction, I haven't thought about it that way. We were actually talking about this right before, and so I don't know how helpful this is or how applicable it is. But if you subscribe to the value of culture in your team, in your business, in your whatever, and you subscribe that it's worth being purposeful about that, and you do planning on it, and what are we going to do, and all this, that sort of thing. The principles that apply to that apply to any group, by the way, including your family. And so this is the thing I would say, and this is, by the way, just over the last few years, something that kind of smacked me in the head about myself was the amount of time that I spend in strategic planning for my business, and I have a group that's much more important to me, and I don't apply those same principles.
Yeah.
Which is my family.
Yeah.
And so I would just say, and this is actually, we're doing this right now, started applying this over the last, couple of years. So I don't know how effective it'll be or whatever, or how good we are at it yet, but we've just tried to apply some of those same strategic planning principles and being clear about our values and what our purpose is and how we want to actuate all that in our family. And just frankly, having those conversations has helped create so much clarity around how we deal sometimes with our kids when they haven't had a good day, and decisions of where we want to send kids to school and how we want to spend vacation time and all that sort of thing, because now all of a sudden it's in looking through a very different lens.
Yeah, it's really cool. Awesome. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So if people want to learn more about you, learn about Jackson Healthcare, get a copy of the book, where can they go?
Sure. Well, go to jacksonhealthcare.com, and there's lots of information on there about the company. You can go to the careers page if you'd love to come join our group. You can find the book on amazon.com.
And the book is Fostering Culture, A Leader's Guide to Purposefully Shaping Culture by the amazing Shane Jackson.
Yep. There we go.
Good. So, and then of course if they want to learn more about you, I imagine that would be on Jackson Healthcare.
Yeah, you can find me on Jackson
LinkedIn
Healthcare.
probably too.
Find me on LinkedIn. I tweet every now and then. So you can, I think it's at Georgia_Shane, GA_Shane. You can find me there. I'm not super good at social media, but LinkedIn, go find me there.
That's good. Fantastic. This is great,
All right.
Shane. This is great. And thanks for listening and watching. And of course, you can catch a new show every week. And if you're not currently listening on iTunes, why not? You should definitely listen. And if you are, please rate, review the show, because that's how other people find it and join our tribe. And of course, you can also go to my site, The Workplace Therapist, for additional resources, blogs, former shows, past shows, articles, all resources to help you become better, not only as a leader at work, but even a leader at home. So until our next show, have a great week and an awesome life.